This is Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium.
Today's guest is Robby Vegas. Robby broke into the music scene at 13 when he played his very first show. When he was 14, he started to perform regularly in his first band and has been involved in music ever since. He has opened up for bands such as Wednesday 13 and Bang Tango. He's played side stage or a VIP stage for such acts as Kiss, Def Leppard, Alice Cooper, Motley Crue, Foreigner, Loverboy, Judas Priest, Deep Purple, etc. Robby is currently writing and recording new songs with his co-director, David Julian. Robby has wrestled since he's 23 years old and has done extra work for WWE many times. And he has wrestled in multiple states plus Canada. He has won a handful of championships and won awards within the wrestling business. His songs and music catalog can be found on every music app. And 6 years ago, he started his podcast called All Bets Are Off with Robby Vegas. It's a pleasure to have you on, Robby.
Oh, it's so cool to be here. And, it was super nice to hang with you at M3.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're a lot of fun. That place was amazing. I mean, I was really blown away. I couldn't believe it was one act right after the next, and there was bigger and bigger acts. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect because it was my first time at M3, but the rotating stage, just everything flowed so smoothly. And it was such a great lineup. And it was nice to see you and Jack and hang out.
Yeah, no, it was really great. And, it's interesting, though, because you really, like last year, a lot of people were saying that it rained so badly, and there was a rumor to rain this year. But the fans are they come out in full force, So I think weather doesn't really pertain when it comes to the music family, right?
I agree. I think they would have been there no matter what. I mean, you had Sebastian Bach on Friday and David Lee Roth on Saturday and Ace Frehley and Stephen Pearcy and Warren DeMartini on Sunday. And that's just the headliners. There was amazing acts all throughout.
That's right. Yeah. And I had the chance of meeting Roxy, with Vixen. And it's just amazing, when they get out. And even Lita Ford, they get out and do these songs that we've heard for so long. But to actually see them still doing it and to see everyone singing along with it. And that's why, when you go back to the original songs that came out and then you mix it up with newer stuff, I think it's great because those oldies are goodies,
Oh, God, yeah. And Roxy is absolutely incredible. And she's better than she's ever been. And I say this all the time, and I mean it, that I don't think anybody plays better than Roxy. She's just so extremely talented and so passionate still, and Vixen's so fun to watch. It's just they're just a show stealer everywhere they go.
Yes, yeah. I actually had the chance of standing on the side of the stage, and I videotaped her just doing a drum solo, and then I put it on social media. And I was just amazed. She was nonstop, and I was just wow, it's pretty incredible. And it's a great shot. I'm gonna have to repost it because there's wind going through her hair. It's just incredible. Yeah. It's funny how every once in a while you'll catch something and then you'll go back and look at it and be wow, that's just not cool. That's really cool. That's a really cool video, paired with amazing playing on top of it, which is great.
Absolutely. And she plays harder than any man, and I will stand by that always. She can put a hole in that stage if she wanted to.
Wow, it's incredible. Yeah, it's really great. So I want to get to you, though. It's so interesting because I wasn't really familiar with your wrestling work, and I went back and I looked at some video, and I was wow, I was blown away. And, I'm dating myself because I'm probably way older than you, but in the 1980s, my sister and I went to a Catholic high school, and the two girls that we went to school with were related to Captain Lou Albano. So he was really kind of the big force at the time, and then Cyndi Lauper's song came out. So the girls were always talking about Uncle Lou, and we were calling him Captain Lou, so it was kind of funny. But we watched wrestling, though, and it was interesting because they really have a lot of characters, So how did you get into wrestling? Just from watching it, WWE, or do you have it in the family?
It was actually, so I've been a lifelong fan, but I got into the wrestling business by accident because I actually started in music first. But I was a lifelong fan of wrestling. My earliest memories were of music and wrestling, specifically Kiss and the Beatles. And I was going through life doing the music thing and still an avid wrestling watcher and fan. And I'd always wondered how you get into it because it's not like you can just go to WWE and be like, knock on the door and say, hey, can I be a wrestler? Like, what do you think? So I discovered there was an independent wrestling scene. And I was working out at a local gym because even before wrestling, I was a gym rat. And a guy came up to me, and he was an independent wrestler, and I recognized him. And he said, "You know, you're pushing a lot of weight for somebody your size. Did you ever think about getting into pro wrestling by chance?" And I was like, "Oh my God!" It was like fate. I was like, "Yeah, all the time." So he took me to a pro wrestling school that was around here, and I actually didn't like it. I didn't like the trainers. I didn't like the environment. And then I did my research, and I found another place that was training wrestlers, and I went there, and I loved it. And I trained there for about a year under Brian Jennings. After about a year, they put me on a show. I had my own interview segment called The Open Mic, and I was in a match that night, and I was also managing some other wrestlers. So I actually had 3 spots in my first show that I was ever on.
That is really incredible. To me, it's just fascinating because I jumped right into the wrestling, and I know you did the music first, but I think what you said when you started to talk about the wrestling is so reflective of being a musician. You said you started to train at a place and you immediately realized you didn't like it. The key to this, which I often find with musicians, is they know what they like, so they don't want to say no to it, but they'll take a different route. And I think people that maybe are not musicians, they may give up easier, or they may just say, you know, I'll take a break and never go back to it. But from what I have seen in a lot of people I know that are musicians, they have a drive in them. It's almost like an internal challenge where they don't want to say no to something. I think that's true, especially even when you start playing music and you realize things that are done a certain way that you were like, yeah, I'm going to adopt that, or I'm definitely never going to do that, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's probably what kind of weaved your way into this wrestling way, you know, is to really realize that you felt like some sort of a passion for it and that you didn't want to be turned off by just one place or just one group of people.
Yeah, that's pretty much where my mind went. It was like, I don't know, something just didn't feel right about those few classes that I took. And I wasn't ready to stop trying because I was like, well, I started this journey and I want to at least have a match. You know, I'd been in and out of different bands and doing all that stuff. And I was like, well, it's no different than the music business. Like if I'm jamming with guys I don't want to jam with, I just find different guys to jam with. So that's pretty much what I did with wrestling. I was like, well, these guys might not be my band, so to speak, but there might be another band out there for me. So I found them.
It's interesting, though, that you had the chance to do a few different things in wrestling, not just, you know, jump in the ring. That's probably how you got involved with doing your podcast, by having the interview ability or the chance to start talking with people and connecting people and advising people. So that's cool. But I have to ask, though, jumping in a ring is something I don't picture myself ever doing. Did you have any? The older we get, the harder we fall, right? So did you actually get hurt at all?
Yeah, that's a common misconception about wrestling that people always ask me is, does it hurt or is it fake? And I always tell people, like, my body can tell you that it's not fake, and the mat is not soft, and the ropes are not just springy rubber bands. I mean, underneath the tape of the rubber ropes, there's, you know, elevator cables, and like try running into actual real rope that's really tight. I mean, it hurts, and your back has to get used to it. And being slammed down to the mat by a guy that's over 6 feet tall, or, you know, drop kicked in the face by a guy that's 5'5" but lightning fast, like there's no way around those things. And people always say, well, what about the chairs and what about the tables? They're real chairs, they're real tables. I mean, and I don't think right now that that's a big secret, but for a long time people would refuse to believe that the wrestling canvas could actually hurt because they just imagine this big trampoline and we're just having a great time. But you take a body slam or a suplex, it's painful. And I'm not shy about telling people that, because what we do is dangerous and it is athletic and it is a sport. And I think for a long time wrestling was discredited and just seen as like a spectacle because of the days of, you know, Hulk Hogan and all that stuff, which they don't even realize back then that those guys were abusing their bodies because they were such good entertainers in the 80s and early 90s, which they call the golden era of wrestling. I mean, the Rock and Wrestling Connection, like you alluded to earlier with Lou Albano and Cyndi Lauper, and all that stuff made it so mainstream that people just thought, oh, well, this is just fun entertainment. It doesn't hurt. But I think as years went on, people have come around and started to say, like, these guys are crazy because this is extremely dangerous and it does hurt.
Yes, and fatal. I remember watching. Someone actually had a mishap happen, and it happened in front of all the fans. So some of these things can go awry during a live performance or something. And I would mention that Sabu, who was a famous wrestler, passed away yesterday. And so many in the wrestling community were doing tributes to him because he was one of the fan favorites. Did you ever get to meet Sabu?
Last week,
Wow.
yeah, we were both doing WrestleCon at the 2300 Arena, which is a very famous arena in Philadelphia. The ECW Arena is the other name for it, and he was there, and it was just like a great time, and we were all together for like 3.5 hours, and I got to meet him, and that was my first meeting with him, actually, which is crazy because there was a lot of people there I've known for years and years and years. But that was the first time I ever got to meet him. And then a week to the day later, he passed away.
Oh, it's so sad. I know. And a lot of these guys are young. Like I know Sabu, they said he was like 60.
Yeah, he was 60.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure. And like you said, I mean, everyone has different cause of death. But a lot of times when you look at someone who does pro sports, their mind may be 40 or 60, but their body could be times 2 because of all of the hits they take and all of the things that they've endured. So I'm glad you're in one piece.
Thank you.
Now when I look at you after watching those videos, now I'm like blown away though, because I saw you tossing a few people around in that ring and they look like rag dolls. And I was like, you go, Robby. So that's really cool. And the guys are like, it's so interesting though how they pair them up because I don't really know the sport. But they pair them up equally, or one guy might even be bigger than the other guy. So to see you kind of tossing them around is really impressive to me. So I want to give you a lot of kudos for that because that's something I never thought that I would be able to even do,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, it's a long road to get to that point. I'm getting close to 15 years now in the wrestling business, and I've faced guys who outweigh me by 150, 200 pounds. I've faced guys that have been smaller than me. I've faced guys that are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 inches taller than me. It's just, whatever you get is what you get, and you got to adapt.
Are you doing any events? Do you have any wrestling things that are coming up before we move into the music conversation?
I do, actually, this coming weekend, which I know it'll be passed after you drop this episode, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. I'll be wrestling in Royal Oak, Michigan. I'm really looking forward to that for Superior Championship Wrestling. And then the following weekend, I'll be in Webster, New York with Extreme Wrestling Force. And I'm also doing another appearance, kind of like WrestleCon, but bigger, at Nickel City Comic Con, and that's right in Buffalo. And there'll be, I'll be there, Vince Valor will be there, the Hardy Boys, Ric Flair, Trish Stratus, Lita. So it's going to be a lot of big-time wrestlers and also a lot of horror movie actors and the cast of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and it's going to be a big, big deal.
That's so great. Yeah, I love that the fans actually have the chance of meeting and doing the photos and getting to meet everyone up close and personal. I think that really makes the fan experience so much bigger for them. And to see that you guys are like for real. Like now I look at you, like I was hanging out with you all last weekend. It was all music, everything. And now I see these videos of you like throwing people around. I'm like, wow, I felt very lucky to stand next to you if something broke out. Now I know you would have been able to take care of it. That's very cool. Well, I have to say you should be very proud of yourself because, first of all, to be involved in something which I can kind of relate to, that not everyone has the same opinion of. So I'm a professional psychic medium. Some people believe in it, some people don't, and when you were talking about the history of wrestling and going back to the 80s and people's idea of things, not everybody has the same impression of something. So you have a passion in something that may not depending upon the person, may not be widely accepted, but that it doesn't turn you away. It just turns you towards that more because you know people are there because they believe in it. I think
Mhm.
there's like a little correlation there that you don't really worry about what other people think. You just kind of follow your own heart.
Yeah, I've always been the type of person that kind of, marches to my own drum. So it kind of falls in line with what I do, wrestling and music and podcasting. It's like, I'm going to do it. Why? Just because I want to.
Exactly. But most of all, because it's fun.
It is.
We like
It
doing
is.
fun things.
And yes, absolutely. And I have a passion for it. And it's not just like, I don't just have something to prove to myself. I genuinely enjoy these things. I have a very deep rooted passion in music and professional wrestling. And even with the podcast, because I started doing that just from being on the road all the time and meeting people, I was started to think like, I really love hearing people's stories and like talking to people. So like, I should bring that to a platform where I can do that, but present it to others, and as you know, because you're doing the same thing.
Yes. How did you come up with the title for All Bets Are Off?
I was just trying to think of something that went with the Vegas name. So I was thinking, like some kind of gambling something or something that could be considered like gambling, but also wrestling, but could kind of sound music related. So All Bets Are Off just was the thing that kind of like fit the bill.
I want to go back to when you were younger because in your bio it says that you broke into the music scene at 13. So when you're 13, you're like in the sixth or seventh grade. How did that all come
Mhm.
about for you?
Well, I started playing guitar when I was 6. When I got into double digits, I was like 10 or 11, and I started trying to sing while I was playing. I'd always had a fascination with Kiss and the Beatles, but now I'm starting to branch out into like, I loved Poison and White Lion and Warrant. I was getting really heavy into stuff like that and Elvis and all this stuff. And I was like, I want to be able to play and sing because I originally just thought Ace Frehley's the coolest guy in the world, so I'm going to be a guitar player. And then I discovered Sebastian Bach and Axl Rose, and I was like, well, I want to be a singer too. So eventually I got to a point where like I have a musical family, so we'd all jam and people were like, oh, he could sing, he could play, he should start playing out, he should start playing out. So when I was 13, my dad was in a band and I randomly got up and I did a couple songs with them. That was my godfather and my father. And then after that, I just kind of had the bug. And my cousin was a drummer and also wanted to sing. By the time I was 14, we had found other guys that we went to high school with. Randomly, we were just jamming in my cousin's basement, and they lived on the same street, and they heard us. So they just grabbed their equipment and came down. And next thing I know, we were a band. They had a place that they liked to see shows at, and they called and they got us booked on the bill to open up this show. And I was 14. The oldest guy was like 17 or 18. And that's how we started playing and getting paid to play as teenagers still in high school. And we didn't even have a band name. And I remember one of my buddies had just come from Sam Goody or Media Player or whatever, one of those music stores that was open back then. They asked like, okay, you guys are on, what's the band name? And we all kind of looked at each other like, oh God, we didn't think of that. And he looked down at one of the albums he just bought, which was by a band called Cold Chamber. And the album was called Dark Days. And he said, Dark Days, we're called Dark Days. And that was our name for like 2 years.
That's thinking on your feet, right?
Yeah, yeah. It just, and we kept saying like, we'll change it eventually. We never did. We just ended up not playing together anymore and all branching off and doing separate stuff. But, it was just one of those things where it was like, oh man, how could we be so stupid to not even come up with a band name before we booked a gig, you know?
That's funny. When you said that your family was musical and you say your dad was in the band, what kind of music was he playing? Because my dad was into like Glenn Miller and just stuff that was just not cool. So what was your family like into?
All different stuff. So my dad's band was kind of like folk rock, Neil Young type stuff, but he also liked Ted Nugent and Nazareth rock bands. And I went through his cassette collection when I was a kid, and that's how I discovered like White Lion and Poison, and those were all in there too, White Snake and all that stuff. My uncle, who was also a really good singer, he liked stuff like Michael Jackson, Earth, Wind and Fire, stuff like that. My other uncle Dave also liked rock and roll, and he played guitar and sang. For a while there, my sister was playing piano and she was playing flute, and like we all just kind of like loved music. And my cousin Eric is currently a musician living in Nashville, so he's still doing his thing too. So we just kind of all would sit around and pass the guitar around.
Wow, you were so lucky. You must have picked your parents. There's a real theory out there. Some people believe that you pick your parents, and another team of people say that you don't pick your parents. But if you were to pick your parents, you picked the right family because
Well, yeah, I
it
mean,
sounds that way, right?
yeah, I mean, even being surrounded by music, going even deeper than that is I got really deep into music because when I was 4 or 5 years old, my uncle, who on my mom's side, my Uncle Joe, gave me a bunch of old records, and in there was Kiss Alive 1, and it changed my life. And then he also got me into the Beatles, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and then my Uncle Ralph, who was also on my mom's side, gave me a whole crate of CDs that was like Vixen, Extreme, Dokken, Fastway, every 80s hair band you could think of, Bullet Boys, like they're all in there. So my two uncles on my mom's side were really like here because that was at a time where I couldn't just sit down on the internet and type in hair metal and listen to whatever came up. Like I had to go find it. So when those guys gave me their records and cassettes and their CDs, I would sit in my room for hours and hours and hours and just listen to Sabbath and Zeppelin and everything that they gave me. And I would sit with my guitar in my lap and I would figure out how to play the songs, and I would just like immerse myself in like 70s and 80s music and even the Beatles and Elvis. And then eventually I got into grunge for a long time. And then I realized like, now hair metal's my thing. And I kind of just stuck with that.
So, would you consider yourself someone who learns by ear?
I took lessons for a while and eventually I stopped because I was noticing that, now that I had some groundwork and some common knowledge, I could learn the basic stuff. I was never a great solo guitar player. I was more of a rhythm guy, but I did dabble when I was younger in trying to be the solo guitar player because the lead guitar player, because I was a huge Ace Frehley guy when I was a kid and CeCe DeVille and, all those guys. So I dabbled in it, but I was never like one of those virtuoso guitar players that, I'm not like a Richie Kotzen that could play absolutely anything, but I just had fun with music and I played from the heart and I can hear certain things and I could play certain things from hearing it. So I would just sit there in front of my either my record player, my cassette player, my 5-disc changer, whatever I had in, and I would just like pop a Sabbath record on and just sit there until I figured out the whole thing.
Wow, you named a lot of good bands in there. Do you remember like asking for music, like in the form of an album, like where you actually said, "This is really what I want"?
Yes, I remember because my uncle had given me that Kiss Alive record. I remember then wanting the other Kiss Alive records, and specifically I wanted Kiss Alive 3. And I remember getting that on cassette and just I wore that thing out. I'd be shocked if it still worked by the time that I was done with it. And I also remember asking for, which was a newer record at the time, was a Poison's Native Tongue. And I loved that album so much. And that was the album that Richie Kotzen played on, actually. So throw his name out there again. But that album like really meant a lot to me. I still love it. And I just remember really like begging my mom, like, I need this Native Tongue record. I need this Poison record. And she made sure I got it. So.
Wow. Well, you have very cool parents, that's for sure. I remember certain albums were coming out, and my parents were like, "No, you're not getting that." They were just looking at the cover, They didn't have any idea what was going on. I had a kind of like a deja vu thing at M3 because my first concert was Rat and Poison. And
Oh, wow.
when I saw Rat live, we were so little, like we were young teens. We couldn't see. It was in Long Island in Nassau Coliseum. So we climbed up and stood on our chairs. And
Yeah.
it was wild to see them play at M3. It just like blew my mind. What was your first concert?
My first concert was the Kiss reunion tour in 1996, and I got to see the original 4 members of Kiss in full makeup, and it was amazing. And I just remember sitting there going, I'm going to do that. Like, I want to do that.
Was that in your hometown?
It was. It
Wow.
was. It
Where,
was
where,
at
where did you grow up?
Buffalo.
Oh, wow. Because I saw them in 96. That particular concert, I remembered it being really pyrotechnic. I mean, everything was blowing up. And it was just wild to see them like that. They were, like you said, full makeup because I think just prior to that, they had taken off their makeup, right?
Yeah, I actually remember when they did the Kiss Unplugged. I think it was a year before the reunion, and I remember watching it on Halloween night on MTV. and Ace and Peter coming out. And I knew as young as I was that that was like a really big deal. And then the next thing I know, they're in full makeup and they're announcing a reunion tour. And that was just like a really magical time in music. And that's when music and albums still mattered, when you couldn't wait to open it up and tear it open and pull the booklet out and read the lyrics or look at the pictures and read the thank yous and all that stuff. And it was just such a cool time to be a Kiss fan.
It really was. I mean, I could still see a lot of albums in my head, like Animalized, and all of those that if you say an album to someone that really knows music, they can start rattling off the songs. That's how much people love Kiss. They have their own army.
Yeah, I'm
So,
actually
yeah.
I'm wearing my Animalized shirt right now.
Oh, wow. That's wild. Oh, wow. So I wanted to ask you, doing music, being in your teens and stuff, even though you had your first band at 14, when did you feel like you really had your first band? Like maybe bigger than that or opening for someone bigger? Where would you say that was?
I would say probably my very early 20s, like 20 to 22, because at the time I was in a band called Angel Down, and I was the rhythm guitar player and the lead singer. And we named the band Angel Down because I was a huge, huge Sebastian Bach fan, and he came out with a record called Angel Down. So when we were coming out with a band name, I was like, well, Godsmack took their name from Alice in Chains. Why can't we take Angel Down and make it like, hey, we love Sebastian Bach, and that's it. We didn't sound like him. We didn't dress like him, nothing. We just liked him. So we named the band Angel Down, and things started happening. And the next thing you know, I had a couple songs in some commercials for this modeling agency. And then I was getting songs on the radio. And then from there, I got to open up for one of my favorite acts of all time, Wednesday 13, who I was just with a couple weeks ago, actually. So that was a connection that stayed in my life since then. And I opened up for Bang Tango, and then we were headlining big shows, and we were doing all kinds of cool stuff. That was really a time for me when I was like, okay, so this is what it feels like when you're starting to get there and you're starting to learn the business.
I love that idea that you took the name like that, and it's a cool name on top of it. But it's also something that people can remember. But then when you start playing and you're opening for these bands and you're starting to realize that you guys are getting attention and that you're getting attention for the right reasons. People are really liking your music. It's not because, they're going to see, a particular member of the band looks like Bon Jovi or something. You guys really had talent. How did you get involved with like getting signed, or how was that all happening? Where were we in time? Are we going back like 15 years ago, or where are we on the calendar?
This would be, let's see. Yeah, it had to be about 16, 17 years ago, probably. And we had a good couple year run, and we did have offers, and we would do showcases. So I don't know if that's still a thing, but at the time we would get booked for these showcase events. So one of them was like a battle of the bands, and it's like, whoever wins this battle of the bands based on the judges and the crowd reactions, we're going to give you guys $5,000 to cut a record or whatever. And we won. So we got to cut a professional record, paid for on somebody else's dime, which was really nice. And then it became, all right, we're going to do a showcase show where you're going to come out and you're going to perform, and there's going to be representatives there from EMI and Metal Blade and all these record companies that were still around at the time. So we did a bunch of those, and we did get different offers from different places. And there was a record label here in Buffalo at the time called Good Carmel, which was run by Robby Vegas from the Goo Goo Dolls. So there was interest in us from different places, but everything kept falling through. And every time we made some kind of progress or a promise was made to us, something would happen and something would change. And it started to get frustrating. And although we were on the radio and we were opening up for these big bands and we were getting more success, we were being interviewed on the radio, all kinds of stuff, but something kept getting taken away from us. And that's where I started to get frustrated. And I was doing solo shows on the side without the band, just acoustic shows, which I still do. I started to lean heavily into doing that. And then eventually my frustration built up and I just needed a break. And that's how I ended up in wrestling. When wrestling came around, I took a little break from music and learned the craft of wrestling first, because my frustration with here's your contract, note, never mind, here's your contract, note, never mind, it started to get the best of me. And you got to remember, at this point, I'm 23 and I've been playing live shows for 10 years already. So to me, I felt like, which is a stupid ego thing at the time, because you're 23 years old and had a little tiny bit of success, is I'm a veteran of this business and this is BS. Like, I should be not getting these broken promises at this point. And so I kind of let it get the best of me.
Well, I always believe in things happen for a reason. You use the words like I was getting frustrated. And then I went into wrestling. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
wrestling's pretty frustrating too, right?
Yes. And that's what I found out is I'm thinking like I'm doing something different, and the promoters and the contracts and the promises are all the same. It's a very, very similar business to music. And once I realized that, there was times where I would start to get back into music again, and then I would fall out of it. And, eventually I found my spark for it again.
You've been very lucky, though. I mean, looking at your bio and seeing these big bands, Kiss
Mhm.
and Def Leppard and Alice Cooper and Motley and Foreigner. But what was like an incredible experience, like with one of those bands? Because they're all iconic and different in their own way.
I would say opening up for Wednesday was great, and that's always going to be one of my favorite things. And I got to do that a couple times. But as far as like doing the side stage gigs for the bigger acts and the VIP stages and all that stuff, Kiss was amazing. I got to take my son with me, and Tommy Thayer was super nice and gave him a guitar pick for the end of the road tour and all that stuff. And it just worked out that way because a lot of the times you go and you do these shows for these big bands and you barely see anybody. Like I was amazed one time when I did the Judas Priest show and KK Downing came out to watch me play, and I was like, oh wow, like just like a mind-blowing moment. But just I think that specifically was cool because my son was so young and he loved Kiss, and for him to see the spaceman come out and say, here you go, here's a guitar pick for the end of the road tour before the doors even opened and they were still setting the stage up and all that stuff, that's always something that I remember.
That's really neat. All of these bands, they draw up big crowds. So for the
Hmm.
fact that you're doing the side stages or the VIP stages, you're playing to really big crowds. And just that alone is an experience in itself.
Absolutely.
I I saw Alice Cooper last summer with Rob Zombie at PNC, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I couldn't believe the creatures and the guillotine and all of this stuff that comes out during a show. It's just incredible that they're able to play through all of that. There's so much going on. It's really a different experience. Some of these bands, how they
Hmm.
entertain and keep the fans engaged in what's actually happening. So tell me about your writing and recording new songs. What is your material like? Are you changing your sound at all?
I think it's actually closer to the 80s sound now than it ever has been before. I think right now that's heavily what I lean into, and it's getting more perfected over the years, especially since I started writing with David Julian. I can do my acoustic stuff and my ballad stuff, and that's great, and I have a lot of fun with it. But writing with David, we get these sounds that are just so 80s, and I love it and I can't get enough of it. And our last two singles, I did do a Christmas song, but I'm not counting that one at the moment. But Break Free and Nothing to Lose, great guest players. Roxy's on drums for both. I have Todd from Bad Marriage on bass for both. Jimmy Bell plays on Nothing to Lose. David plays on the tracks, obviously, and we just have such a good chemistry. And I wouldn't say that I made the conscious effort to make it sound more like that. That's just kind of what happened. And it was just one of those things where we did the first song, and then I sent him a riff for the second song, and I said, what do you think about this? And then what he sent me back was a combination of my riff and a riff that he wrote, and that was the sound that it was. And David's a great writer, and he's got co-writes, with Ace Frehley and stuff like that. So it just kind of was born into like, okay, now I feel like I'm at the top of my game this many years later, as opposed to where I thought I was at 23 when I was getting so frustrated.
That's really amazing because like Jimmy Bell, I know Jimmy Bell. He actually was on my radio show, and he's amazing. Just his whole way, how he approaches the guitar and how he plays and his background and everything. It's just I can't wait to hear these songs. I'm actually going to play them at the end of the interview, so the audience will be able to hear both of these songs. But the inspiration, I find it interesting, co-writing with someone. A lot of times we think like, what's going on inside my head, and then you run it by someone else, and it's
Mhm.
either total opposite or you're both right on track. So it sounds like you and David have like a chemistry of writing together.
Absolutely. And a lot of people have told me that since these two songs came out, Roxy included, like you guys should keep at this and you guys should keep writing together because I feel like this is something special. So I plan to keep writing with him. And also David writes for Frontiers, and he has another partner, Giancarlo, who is equally as talented. And those guys are just off the wall amazing songwriters. and I can't give them enough credit and enough props. They're that good.
So that's great. Yeah, Frontiers is like all over the place now. And that's really awesome. I wanted to mention like dropping songs. So when songs are dropped now, it's so interesting because when I speak with the younger generation, I'm like, so when is this coming out? They're like, no, it's streaming. It's like, I was like, okay, I have to like change my lingo now, everything
Yep.
is streaming or Spotify or Title or so when you release these songs, how can the audience listen to them? How are they dropped? And what is the process with that?
So as of right now, everything that I'm putting out is just going to be downloadable or streaming for now. I have had people ask me about like, vinyl and hard copies in any form, which could come down the road. I'm not saying that it won't, but at the moment, I want to start working on an EP, and then I'll kind of take it from there, and we'll see how many people reach out and ask about physical copies before we take it to that step, which of course I would love to do because that's how I used to do it. And I kind of miss it. I miss having the physical here, handing it to somebody and watching them, open it and look at it and all that. So it's not out of the question. But right now, just for the sake of getting the songs out there and globally out there, they're on, Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, and 150 other streaming platforms. So they are out for the entire world to listen. Whoever's listening to this interview can get them right now. Just search Robby Vegas on your favorite music app. And if I get enough messages saying, hey, we want like a limited edition vinyl or whatever, I'll take pre-orders and I'll take it from there. But that's right now where me and David are just focused on 3 to 4 more songs that we're going to write and then put out the EP.
That's great. No, it really is great. And what I also like is even with social media, like now I'm going to be sharing these songs and blasting these songs out for you. But it's also interesting when you create a story, especially on Instagram. You could be talking about something or showing someone's picture, and then you can drop music into it. So, do you know if those 2 songs are actually available on social media, like to tag in a story?
Yep. Yes, they are. They're available everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere that you can find music, it is there.
That's great. That's like my favorite. I actually feel like I'm doing a poster board, when I
Mhm.
do those stories, but it's choosing the right music, especially when you create a TikTok. The audience on TikTok I think is a lot different than Instagram and Facebook. So sometimes it's choosing the right music that gets someone's attention or pairing
Mhm.
up the music. Like just this past weekend, I featured Rick Ocasek's Grave. And he's got a lot of music that I could easily use. And the song that I picked, a couple of people wrote in the comments like, wow, I'm really surprised you picked that song. That's like they felt that it was an underrated song, for Rick.
Mhm.
And I did it on purpose because I really liked it. And you just don't know the audience. Do you know what I mean? And I took a risk with that because it could have been possibly people wanted to hear something which would be more recognizable. But if you were really a Rick
Mhm.
Ocasek fan, and that's kind of the point I was making, like if you're really a Rick Ocasek fan, you would visit his grave like me. But you would know that song. Do you know what I mean? So I just
Yeah.
find it interesting with music and the influence of social media, but I think it's great for an artist because you can almost parse out who the true fans are and who's not a true fan, and then you can target your audience in such a bigger way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do notice too, because my previous releases are out on all these platforms as well. And there's 2 EPs. One's called Angels and Demons with 5 or 6 songs on it, and then there's Whispers in the Dark with 5 songs on it. And one is just straight up hard rock, and the other one's more of like a ballady, acoustic rock kind of. But I did put, there's like a blues rock song on there, and there's an actual like rockin' track on there that I really enjoy. But I noticed that my audience they gravitated more towards that hard rock track. So, when I kept that in mind when I, was writing these last few singles with David. But then they surprised me because they enjoyed the Christmas track too. So you really don't know, but I try to stick to my guns and just like what I like and write what comes to mind because I like to write from feeling and have a good story and, if they like it, they like it. And now I look back at these other EPs and they almost sound unfinished to me because the work that I'm doing with David is so good.
You're so versatile to do a Christmas song. So, what song did you feature?
I wrote my own. It was an original Christmas song.
And that's even better. So what is it like? Is it do you have is it really like a hard rock Christmas song?
I'd say more like a ballad. It's more like an 80s rock ballad. And it is also still available for streaming. I'm not taking it down or anything, so it's up all year long. But when I brought the song to David, I had it written, which is strange because normally I just give him bits and pieces and we kind of do it together. But I was kind of like, here, I wrote this song, it's finished, but I want us to beef it up together and turn it into more of an 80s ballad. Let's put some rock guitar in there. Let's put a cool solo in there. And David's solo is so good in that song. It really captures a Christmas vibe, but you listen to it and you go, oh, well, the guy that wrote that is definitely a rock influence guy, you know?
That's great. I can't wait to hear it, though. That is really great. Now I'm going to be doing a deep dive on all of your stuff. So I want to be able to make sure I get to anything that you're wanting to promote. So your upcoming events, how we can listen to your music, everything and all, Robby Vegas, including your podcast.
All right, so podcast is on every podcast app, including SiriusXM, and just search All Bets Are Off with Robby Vegas podcast. A lot of great interviews are on there. You'll find like Dee Snider, Kip Winger, you'll find Richie Kotzen, and if we're not doing interviews, there's usually some kind of album breakdowns and things like that, and a lot of horror movie actors as well, people from Friday the 13th, it's in Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all that stuff. As far as my music, again, it's on every streaming platform, and there will be an EP coming, hopefully before the end of the year, but if not, then definitely early next year, depending on how many songs we decide to write, or who knows, maybe it'll turn into a full length for all I know. And as far as wrestling goes, I will be in Michigan this weekend. I will be in upstate New York the following weekend. I will be in Western New York that same weekend because I have an acoustic gig. I'll be doing the VIP stage for Weird Al in Darien, New York, July 11th, I believe. And I'll be bouncing between Pennsylvania, Michigan, Canada, and New York for wrestling shows and a few things that I'm not allowed to say just yet. But, as they come, I'll be posting. So follow me on Instagram at Robby_Vegas_official, and you'll see the updates when I am allowed to talk about those things.
Very good. And your podcast, how can we hear your podcast?
Everywhere. SiriusXM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. I just recently started doing YouTube videos for my podcast. The first 4.5 years, I think I didn't. And then I just started doing clips to try and get people over to the audio side. But now that the audio side is doing well, I'm posting full interviews on YouTube as well. So YouTube is still kind of like new to me, but I'm trying to get some good content on there.
Yes, no, I know. I'm learning things too. It's a big wide world that we're living, and they keep throwing more and more at us.
Right.
So it's
Right.
like we have to keep up with the times, I guess. Before we go, though, is there anything that you're thinking of doing maybe in the next year that's not on your calendar or something that you have that's on your wish list?
Well, last year I got to dabble in a little bit of acting. I was in a couple of independent releases. One was a cameo, one was a small role, and I got to work with Dan Licata, who was a writer for Saturday Night Live, and be a part of his stand-up comedy special. So I wouldn't be opposed to something like that coming around again. I know I just was asked to provide some music for another film that is in the making right now that'll be on like Tubi and stuff like that. So you never know if stuff like that starts happening. And I'd also like to get a few more guest stars on some of my songs. And, I got some guys in mind, and I'm working on putting a live band together because I've gotten a few offers and talked to a few guys, and we'll kind of just see what happens.
This is very exciting. I mean, to see you in acting, I really think that would be great. So I wish you the best, Robby. I can't wait to see you guys again and hang out. But I'm going to be downloading all of your music because I'm really excited about it. And we're going to be playing Nothing to Lose and Break Free. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Take care, Robby.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Been under fire, and I'm
You have been listening to Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium, Dream Central Station, LLC. My audio editor is Al Hemberger at the Loft Recording Studios in Bronxville, New York. This is WNEW 102.7 FM radio.